Well, everyone, looks like it's that time of year again. Oh, you thought I was talking about insert closest holiday here? No, no, no. I mean, it's time for me to talk about Ben 10. I've already talked about every previous iteration of Ben 10, and I've talked about related shows. All I have left to do now is cover Omniverse. Omniverse was, and still kind of is, the most controversial iteration of Ben 10. I mean, really, I could have just skipped everything else and just gone straight to Omniverse, because there is so much to just dig into with this one. But before I do, I just gotta talk about the initial backlash when it first came out. I remember it like it was yesterday. I kinda despised it, which, everyone else did also, which that makes sense, but I mean, I'm kinda surprised I did, because, I was basically still in the womb at the time. I didn't even know I was capable of having opinions. Everything about it was cringe! The art style? Cringe! The humor? Cringe! The intro? Cringe! Well, no, actually. You see, disliking Omniverse is about as outdated as an episode of Game Theory. You see, in recent years, people have come to better understand and respect Omniverse for what it does. But I don't believe Omniverse became good. I believe it was always good, and we only just now realized that it was always good. One of the common air quotes criticisms with Omniverse was its change in art style. And that would be absolutely fine if it weren't for the fact that the art style was done by cartoon legend Derek J. Wyatt. You know, the guy who created Transformers, Scooby-Doo, and, dang it, what was the other one? I forgot what the other one was. And yes, I know I was guilty of this. Everyone was guilty of this. I'm sure you were guilty of this. Yes, it's okay to dislike the style if you dislike the style, but there are people that say that it's worse than a toddler drawing, and at that point you're just being disrespectful. In fact, I would even argue that the Omniverse art style is better than the Alien Force art style. And if you don't believe me, just look back at the two images I just showed and notice how the Omniverse one has a lot more shading and color than the Alien Force one. The designs are pretty hit or miss. Obviously, some are going to be better and some are going to be worse. I mean, this Eunice design was practically wasted, and it's such a shame. Why didn't they use her in more episodes? Oh, incest. That's why. That makes sense. My dad was in the room while I was watching this, by the way. Sure, UAF was more realistic, but Omniverse was so much more detailed. And the same thing applies to the alien designs. On one hand, Jury Rig looks like a Helluva Boss character, and on the other, my boy. Look how they have murdered my boy. And the aliens in general, much like just the rest of Omniverse, they're a lot more silly this time around. Now, some were pretty cool, and others were Crash Hopper. Remember when Ghost Freak scared Zombozo? Well, now there's an entire alien that's just that concept. Originally, he was also meant to have acid powers, but they never got to show that. So basically, he only shows up whenever Ben's in a situation the writers just don't know how to get him out of. I think out of every series, Omniverse has been pulling random aliens out his ass the most. I want the real Lego Ben 10. The real Lego Ben 10. Perfection. Something I really appreciate about the Omniverse aliens is how they actually brought back almost every other alien that's appeared prior. I can't say I'm a fan of the fact that a lot of the Alien Force aliens were pushed aside in favor of bringing back the classic aliens, which, like, I mean, I know, yeah, they're like the classic ones and all, but like, I like the Alien Force ones more. Something else I'm not a huge fan of is how they made a bunch of the aliens really buff. Like, they gave them all the same build as Wrath. But again, I don't hate all the Omniverse aliens. I seriously think Astrodactyl is one of the most underrated aliens ever. I mean, he's so much cooler than Jet Ray. And of course, there's the transition. Now you might be thinking, what transition? What are you talking about? Well, Alien Force was very realistic and grounded, and Ultimate Alien was, dark and, depressing. Omniverse was a lot more goofy and focused a lot more on humor. A lot of fans were very turned off by this new Ben. They found him very annoying. They thought of him as a, what's the word? Dumbass idiot. Fans like this were only really looking at basic surface level elements. They didn't really care to go deeper beyond that. But I actually really like Omniverse Ben. He's able to have fun, be himself, and save the day without being a total asshole like how he was in Alien Force Season 3. But Omniverse Ben, he's not perfect. Store 23 was a great episode and all, but the entire thing would have never happened if he had just kept his cool. I mean, sure, it's pretty baffling to watch someone like Carl Nesmith go from kidnapping people and leaving dead bodies in refrigerators to being a cliche supervillain arguing about team names, but Omniverse chose its path. It took a different direction. It had its tone, and it stuck with it. The series mostly loses the grounded element in favor of focusing more on the sci-fi, but it does the sci-fi so well. Now, if you prefer the more serious, realistic Ben, that's perfectly fine. I like that iteration of Ben too, I just prefer this one. Both versions of Ben are equally valid and likable in their own ways. It's completely fine to like and or dislike either one. Being dark doesn't always equate to being good. Oh, and of course, Omniverse was never ever dark. Well, unless you count this, and this, and this, and this, and this. And Omniverse has such a good soundtrack. The other shows I've covered have all had stellar soundtracks, but Ben 10's always felt very plain. It never had the same flair. The classic series soundtrack was very stylized and it did fit, but I got kinda tired of it after a while. The Omniverse soundtrack, which is composed by Emmy winner Perry Grip, is such a breath of fresh air. Everything from mundane conversations to action-packed fight scenes to heartfelt goodbyes has an absolute banger playing in the background. And what I think I like most about Omniverse is that out of every series, it's the most comic book. Let's start with, well, the art style. It's very colorful and very detailed. It definitely looks ripped straight out of a graphic novel. And the stories themselves are a lot more comic book as well. Some episodes are very weird and ridiculous, but then there's also other episodes that are very weird and interesting that have a legitimately cool sci-fi concept presented. There is a lot of information contradicted and thrown away, which does happen a lot in comics, but there's also a huge emphasis on continuity, which again also happens a lot in comics. One of my biggest issues with Alien Force and Ultimate Alien is how it mostly ignores what happens in the classic series, and Omniverse fixes this issue. Hey, remember when they had that whole wedding with all the mud aliens? Well, yeah, they actually did remember. Boy, oh boy, the video is already 10 minutes long, and I've only just finished talking about the context. But I'm sure it can't be that bad. How many episodes are in Omniverse again? Oh, crap. In literally the first 5 seconds of Omniverse, already Gwen and Kevin have to leave. And why, you might be asking? Well, for the same reason any character leaves a kid show. They have to go to college or something. Before I continue on, I just want to stop and point out that this Zombozo looks freaking dope. And of course, fans, being fans, they immediately got all upset and didn't like how their favorite group got split up in the new series, which, I mean, yeah, I get that. The title of the episode is literally The More Things Change. The whole moral is that in life, there are things we can and can't control, and we have to accept that. If I had a nickel for every time a Derek J. White show did a story about accepting and moving on that everyone hated, then I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice. I know I keep teasing Teen Titans, but I'll cover it eventually, don't worry. Now, except with Teen Titans, the journey ends with moving on, whereas with Ben 10, moving on is only the beginning. And now Ben has to continue his heroics on his own, or so he thought. He soon discovers that Grandpa Max assigned him with a plumber partner named Rook Blanco. Now, Rook here is voiced by Bumper Robinson, who was also in, say it with me class, Teen Titans. Rook has a lot of different skills and weapons, but he doesn't really understand Earth all that much, and he tends to take things very literally. But this only fuels the buddy cop bromance between them. You see, everyone in the main Ben 10 cast is either a human or some kind of human-alien hybrid. Rook is the first full alien addition. With the introduction of Rook, we're given a lot of new lore. We see his homeworld, meet his family, know about his culture. It's a level of world building that most of Ben's aliens don't even come close to. But it still felt like we were only scratching the surface. There's so much more of Rook and his people that could have been explored. I forgot that Rook's girlfriend even existed because she's just such a girlfriend type character. Is doing an episode about Rook's sister being a plumber really that much harder than doing an episode about a porcupine getting its titties milked? I've heard a lot of people get asked what they think the worst Ben 10 episode is, and honestly, I don't think I've heard a single one of them say this episode, which is a crime, because this is the most awful thing I've seen come out of the entire franchise, and that is a fact. If you disagree with me, that's not an opinion, that is a lie. It is a fact that this is awful. Ben and Rook chase some criminals down this sewer hole and then discover an entire hidden alien civilization called Undertown. It's said that whenever Waybig and Evil Waybig accidentally stopped on Bellwood, a bunch of aliens came down and then fixed everything. And then after that, they built a bunch of tunnels underground and then just over time formed Undertown. But it's never actually canonically stated in universe. A hidden civilization of aliens does make a lot of sense with Ben 10, and I really like all the visuals and background details of Undertown. And again, I like how it expands on the alien side of things. I'm not sure if this is a plot hole or anything, but Ben doesn't know about Undertown, and he has known that there are aliens hiding on Earth, and he has, been working with the plumbers for a while now. So why does he not know Undertown exists? I don't know. I feel like I get why, because, new viewers and all that thing, but like they should have just had him show up and already know what the place is. Because at the same time, the Omniverse pilot seems to suggest that Ben frequents the plumber's headquarters, even though throughout Alien Force and Ultimate Alien he doesn't. Sure, the plumbers were less active in those days, but they probably just between Ultimate Alien and Omniverse set up a new base and became more active on Earth, which you'd think that at the same time Ben would have also discovered Undertown during that period. So I guess what I'm trying to say is it's good world building, except it's also bad world building. So in Undertown, there's a species called the Kraho, and one of them is a human hybrid named Esther, and she becomes Ben's new love interest for this series, except hold on a moment. Wasn't there someone we spent like 90 whole episodes building a relationship with Ben? Now there is an explanation for Julie's absence, but God, it's lazy. Apparently what happened is Ben was on the phone with her while he was hardcore gaming, and he accidentally yelled all of his gamer rage into the phone, and she misinterpreted and thought he wanted to break up. Not only is that 1,000 times more unrealistic than Aliens, but it paints Ben as an ignorant asshole. Now, yes, in the real world, sometimes relationships don't always work out. And it's perfectly fine to explore that in a monster superhero cartoon setting, but not like this. But the cherry on top, the cherry on top of the terrible ice cream not sundae, is that this whole explanation is revealed after Esther is introduced. So the entire episode where Ben meets Esther and they're teasing their relationship, he's not once thinking of Julie. And Ben had the nerve to try to win back Julie, even though he had already been going strong with Esther. Screw off, you green-eyed cuck. Now, this isn't to say that Esther is all bad. She definitely had a lot of potential. The Kraho are kind of evil, and if you recall, Esther herself is actually part human. Things like this could open a lot of new possibilities for storytelling. They never actually reveal who her parents are, which you'd think they should at some point, since, like, a human Kraho hybrid is kind of a big deal among their people, and at the same time, the way her whole character is concluded is arguably worse than Julie. Esther as a whole, not bad, but not great. So anyways, moving on. Everyone's dead. Like actually. Like dead. So very early on in Omniverse, a bunch of these bad guys start fighting each other over this device called the Annihilar Genesis Phymiagast, or Annihilarg for short. The Annihilarg is a device created by a race of fifth-dimensional aliens called the Quantumalia, and what it does is it's basically just an on and off switch for the entire universe. Rook knows about the Quantumalia because on his planet it's like a tradition to tell their tale, but like, if no species in the entire universe has ever seen them before, then how do they know about them? So the Riedel brothers, of course, being the inbred weirdos they are, they accidentally set it off and then kill everyone. And no, that's not an exaggeration. The Annihilarg actually wipes out the entire Ben 10 universe, and technically, it stays destroyed. Ben transforms into Alien X and he creates a new universe to replace it. So, yeah, technically, the original universe is still destroyed. Everyone is still dead. They're all just replaced with lifeless copies now. Also, after the reboot happens, Ben gets like a white hoodie, and honestly, I think the white hoodie is like the best Ben 10 clothing design. Like, no, better than the UAF jacket, better than the classic t shirt. The hoodie for life. I know this episode is very important to the canon of Ben 10, but I still don't really like the way everything plays out. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Especially since they had the opportunity to do something similar in Ultimate Alien. If you're gonna do an episode where the entire universe is destroyed and recreated, it's supposed to be a very big deal on the timeline, then might as well do it in the finale and not just a random season 1 episode. I understand that this episode sets up things like the Quantumania that couldn't have been set up in Ultimate Alien, but even with that, there's some issues I have with it, but I'll get into that later on. And look, I hate the Omniverse Alien X design as much as the next guy, but at least now he's actually important to the story. Seasons 1 and 2 of Omniverse set up a storyline that finally utilizes the time jump from the classic series. Currently, Ben and Rook are being hunted down by this mysterious alien guy named Kyber. And Kyber has a device called the Nemetrix that can turn his hunting hound into the predator of any of Ben's aliens. Alien hunters are very common in sci-fi, but the concept of a predator omnitrix is very interesting, especially since Kyber himself isn't the one using it. He's using it on his dog. The Nemetrix, as intriguing as it is, what's even more surprising is its backstory. Throughout the storyline, we're shown several flashbacks of classic Ben repeatedly clashing with this being known as malware that's essentially a vampire version of Upgrade. Unlike the traditional mechamorph, whenever malware touches a piece of technology, he absorbs it and assimilates it into his body. And hey, doesn't Ben have a big hunk of technology on his wrist? Malware was actually a failed experiment created by Azimuth. All this is kinda Azimuth's fault, 'cause he was willing to just sit there and let the man die. Real slick there. Most of the time when Ben encountered malware, he would use a transformation called feedback. Now, hold on a sec. Feedback, malware, so many things thrown at us, and we've never even heard of these guys. In fact, we still don't even know how this ties in with the Kyber thing. Well, the fact that we don't know is kind of the point. Something you might notice is that feedback is kind of classic Ben's go-to alien, which is weird because we've never seen him before. And malware has the power to corrupt and destroy technology just by touching it. Have you caught on to where this is going? No? Okay, then let me just keep explaining. But before I do that, real quick, I'll just tell you his connection to Kyber. Malware used his powers to create a duplicate of the blueprint for the Omnitrix, and he later gave it to an evil scientist named Dr. Psychobos, and he created the Nemetrix. He says, and I use the term loosely a lot, even in situations where it doesn't really apply. But why did they wait till now to attack? Because for the past 5 years, Kyber's been doing his best Chris Hansen impression and been going around catching predators. Another reason is because Ben thought malware was dead this whole time. One day, while in a battle with malware, he would rip the feedback transformation out of the Omnitrix and destroy him. Shortly after, Ben would overload feedback with the Omnitrix energy, and he would also supposedly die as well.
Supposedly, this is the moment that Ben decided he wanted to remove the Omnitrix and then go into retirement, like how we saw him at the start of Alien Force. The fan base, unanimously agreed that that was the moment Ben retired, or Ben decided to retire, even though I'm pretty sure I read somewhere that, the production crew wanted this to not be that. Like, they very specifically wanted this to not be the reason he retired. So feedback was kind of made to be the coolest alien, like both to the viewer and to Ben himself. They wanted to make him just as epic and badass as possible just so they could kill him off. You see, they wanted to do this storyline that very heavily depended on the fact that there was a before time skip era and after time skip era. And the issue with that is the same issue that a lot of other prequels fall into. It's kinda hard to do a storyline about one of the classic fan favorite aliens getting destroyed when most of the classic fan favorite aliens have already returned. But at the same time, what else were they supposed to do? I guess they could have used Eye Guy. They could have had Eye Guy be the main focus of Omniverse. It's still hard to believe that they've never not shown, not mentioned, but not even alluded to the existence of feedback or to the existence of some tragedy that triggered Ben's retirement. The creators of Classic Ben 10 never included feedback because they didn't know that 7 years later someone would make a prequel to their series that would feature a completely new character. Hindsight is the enemy of prequels. But hey, at least Feedback is an electric alien, and that adds to his overall importance and uniqueness in Ben's arsenal, right? But in all seriousness, Feedback and what he serves to the story adds a lot of depth to Ben's character. Now, a lot of people did find Feedback's death scene very sad, but it is possible for someone to look at it and say, yeah, but he wasn't alive, he wasn't real, he wasn't like a real character or anything, so why should his death matter? The thing is, it might not matter to you, but it does matter to Ben. We've seen countless times before that Ben doesn't view his transformations as transformations. He looks at them with a level of respect. In fact, one of the main story beats of Ben 10,000 was that Ben stopped seeing his transformations as like personalities and more as faceless weapons. All those previous times, Ben was able to persevere and rescue his transformations. Not this time. This entire arc is all about putting that belief against a cheese grater. Malware killed Feedback, Ben killed Malware, and now he's found out that the dude's been still alive and active for 5 years. It's like the ghost of his greatest failure has come back to haunt him. What really adds insult to injury here is that Diamond Head has actually defeated Malware before, but he still chose to go against Azimuth and Grandpa Max's wishes and use Feedback anyway, and thus his ego and pig-headedness indirectly got Feedback killed. Fans tend to criticize later iterations of Ben for not being mature enough, and this version of Ben, the less mature version, had consequences, very serious consequences, for his actions. This all culminates in a literal showdown of Ben and his team versus Malware and his team. Ben gets vored by Malware, and there he's forced to confront his inner demons. Ben meets a hallucination of his kid self, and to paraphrase what he tells him, he says, that yes, failure is bad, but laying down and dying is really no way to deal with it. All you can do at that point is to just keep moving forward and keep trying. Moments like these are what children's television was made for. This realization gives Ben a piece of himself back, and this is thematically represented by him re-unlocking feedback and triumphantly escaping Malware's body. Feedback is Ben, or is Ben's childlike charisma. He lost him when he was very young and had never been the same, but now he's back and stronger than ever. Then he ruthlessly executes Malware in front of his entire species. Malware only did this because Azimuth was irresponsible, just saying. The Malware's revenge arc is hands down the best and most satisfying arc in all of Omniverse, maybe even all of Ben 10, period. Although I would have liked it a bit more if maybe Rook was the one to give Ben the pep talk, to make their relationship a bit more personal. And now on to Season 3. The Season 3 premiere of Omniverse is very surprising. And that's because, well, let's just say a certain family of explorers makes an unexpected visit. The Secret Saturdays are back, baby! The first video I did in this series was on the Secret Saturdays. How can you get more full circle than this? Real quick, I want to talk about the Generator X crossover before this one. I feel like last time I talked about this, I may have been too hard on it with the criticisms, and I didn't really specify that there is a lot to like about it. But yeah, I just wanted to get that out of the way first. So yeah. I actually remember watching this episode when I was younger, and even then I still remembered the Saturdays, but kind of wondered why they were there in the first place, since no one else on the entire planet remembered them. I think even now no one really knows why they made this episode. They just decided, hey, remember that show that aired 3 years ago that no one ever talks about anymore? Let's just bring it back just for the sake of bringing it back. Why not? The story of the episode is that Dr. Animo has teamed up with Vivi Argost, the Saturdays' old archenemy, so Ben has to team up with the Saturdays to stop them. At first glance, this might seem like every other crossover ever, but if you look deeper, you see that there's a lot more lore to it than you might think. The episode isn't just, oh look, it's Ben 10, but the Saturdays are there for some reason. No. The story directly continues from the finale of The Secret Saturdays, which, if you haven't seen, this episode will spoil pretty much the entire show. When Dr. Animo reanimated Vivi Argost, he did it after 3 years. This is to explain the real-world 3-year time gap between now and the Saturday's finale. Dr. Animo, Hex, and Enoch were all hinted at being allies of Argost way back in the original Saturday's show. So the villain team-up here isn't as cliché and random as you might think. Oh, but wait, I hear you deniers saying, how can they be in the same universe when Ben has never encountered any cryptids and Zack has never encountered any aliens? Ben once fought a Yeti in an incident that, what do you know, involved Dr. Animo. And as for why no aliens are in Secret Saturdays, well, just think about it. Secret Saturdays is about a boy and a cat monster uncovering mystic secrets and tracking down chupacabras. Having aliens would just distract from all that. And I'm sure you remember I really don't like when things break their level of realism. Aliens are rumored to exist, which I think is perfectly fine. In fact, even Galvan Prime, the homeworld of Asmus species, is directly mentioned in one episode. Now let's talk their designs. What do I think of their new, updated designs? Honestly, I don't really care. It is a shame that most of the old voice actors can't come back, but you get what you get. The new designs aren't bad, but you can never beat the classics. Actually, that was a lie. There is one design that is god awful, and if I could physically do a murder on it, I definitely would. Fiskerton. No, seriously, I think this design is awful. This new Fiskerton design is way too ferocious. The whole point of Fiskerton is that he was an adorable, gentle giant. The first time we see Fiskerton, he's built up as being this big, menacing monster. Then, once we actually see him, it's revealed that he's friendly. Making him more beast like completely ruins that. So, apparently, the Saturday's new updated armor uniform in this was based on the plug suits from Evangelion, but I actually think they look a lot more like Captain Nemesis's suit. And to someone who hasn't seen Secret Saturdays, they might get very confused by that. The episode ends where Ben murders Argost. Like, actually. The Saturdays spent like 3 years tracking down Argost, and in the end, the only reason they beat him is just because they got lucky and he, like, accidentally killed himself, basically. And in one episode, Ben just waltzes in and kills him easily. Wow. If I had a nickel for every time Ben used feedback to actually murder one of his enemies, and that enemy was a somewhat mechanical being voiced by Corey Burton, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice. To close out this crossover review, I'm gonna just end with one little itty bitty criticism, is that I feel like the parents don't really, like, do anything in the episode. And Drew, I think, really suffered from not having the same voice actress, since she doesn't really feel like the same character anymore. Oh, but even though the crossover is done, that does not mean I am done talking about Secret Saturdays for this Ben 10 Omniverse review. There is more to say about them later on, but I'll get to that. Although it is a shame we never got an Omniverse sequel to Heroes United. Come on, CN! We need to know what happened to Alpha! Actually, speaking of Generator X, didn't they have a Chupacabra in one episode? Does that mean that there could be an entire alternate version of the Secret Saturdays living in Rex's universe? That is a whole nother can of worms right there. So, of course, it's no secret that I absolutely adore the Malware arc. Season 1 and Season 2 are very well put together. But Season 3, when compared to the first two, is kind of like the story arc equivalent of a filler episode. Now, Season 3 isn't really bad, but I wouldn't exactly call it a banger either. Things like this tend to happen when you have so many arcs and so many different stories. Some of them are gonna turn out less cooked than the others. Season 3 focuses on a race of aliens called the Incursions who are trying to conquer the Earth. For quick context, the Incursions are those dudes that accidentally blew themselves up way back in the Dagon arc of Ultimate Alien. Also, they're frogs. This season brings back Vilgax, and they do in a pretty, I guess, surprising way, by instead of having him be the main villain, or even a villain at all, he actually has to team up with Ben, and they have to rescue him from the Incursions. I was a bit put off by Vilgax's design at first, especially the little crown thing he has at the top of his head. But I got used to the design pretty quickly. In Omniverse, Vilgax is voiced by Steve Bloom, kind of like how he was in the classic series. I don't know if he's doing a different voice, or maybe I just got used to it, but I really, really liked his portrayal in Omniverse. Even though I really enjoyed this Vilgax, I can't say he's exactly solid. Remember how way back in Alien Force they pretty haphazardly tried to make Vilgax more subversive by establishing this relationship between him and his people? But they ended up doing it without really giving it a proper payoff, and it ended up just feeling random and out of place. Well, they try to do that again here, but worse. At the end of the episode, Ben is about to get shot, and at the last second, Vilgax jumps in front of the bullet, and then he gets shot and then dies. This moment right here implies that Vilgax has some weird Batman Joker style relationship with Ben, where he thinks that, fighting Ben is what gives him purpose in life, and that without Ben, he's not complete or something weird like that. They never really explore the implications of this type of relationship between these two, but honestly, I'm fine with that. I feel like we didn't really need to see Ben 10 and Vilgax have some kind of, I don't know, that kind of bond with each other. I think part of the reason why they never delved deeper into that idea is because that it was never really meant to be a defining character moment. It was just a one-off gag, which is another issue with Omniverse Vilgax, is that a lot of what makes him threatening is kind of sacrificed for jokes and stuff. So on Rook's homeworld, there is this fruit called Ambrogia, and it's basically the stereotypical sci-fi mineral that can do and make anything. Like they use it to make tools, and they use those tools to mine it, but if the tools they use to mine it are made out of it, then how are they able to mine it in the first place? And apparently it can also mind control people too. So the incursions steal all the Ambrogia and they use it to create a mind control juice. Then they would use the mind control serum to create an army of mutant Waybigs called Waybads, and then they'd stage a hostile takeover of Earth. I believe that out of all of them, this one got the most screen time. Wonder why. The incursions tell Ben that unless he surrenders, they'll use the Waybads to destroy the Earth, and with no other choice, Ben chooses to surrender. I remember seeing this episode when it first came out, and I never thought it was a bad cliffhanger. It is a very no-win, high-stakes situation. What ends up happening is that Atea, the princess of the incursions, decides she wants to be their new leader, so she sabotages the whole operation and then helps the team win. After Ben escapes, he transforms into an incursion and then goes undercover. It's a pretty neat way to introduce a new alien, but it does kind of make you wonder how he didn't get caught by them since he looks nothing like the other incursions. At one point, the incursions lose control of the Waybads and they end up rampaging everywhere, but Ben is still able to beat all of them, even though some were on the other side of the world. In part one, they're built up as being this big, inescapable, unbeatable thing. They're the whole reason Ben surrendered in the first place, but then in part two, he just beats them relatively easily. It makes sense for Atea to help them if it means overthrowing her father, but I don't think this really makes her good now, and I feel like it shouldn't also, so that's some gray area stuff right there. It opens the possibility for her as a frenemy, is I guess what I'm trying to say, but I'm having a lot of trouble saying it because my brain is literally pea soup. Overall, Incursion Invasion arc pretty decent. Not as good as the Malware arc, but still not bad. So remember how in the classic series Max had that plumber partner named Phil, but then he turned bad and tried to kill them and everything? Way back during the Malware arc, Malware and Dr. Psychobos kidnapped Phil and used him as a guinea pig for their Nematrix. The experiments actually permanently damaged Phil's DNA, and now anytime he comes in contact with electricity, he'll transform into a hybrid of a bunch of different predators. The way the episode plays out, you're expecting them to find a cure for him, but they actually don't. Instead, he's stuck like this, with his decaying mind and mutating body. At the end of the episode, he begs them not to send him back to the No Void, but they have no other choice. He's just too dangerous. Malware and Psychobos tortured and mutilated a somewhat innocent man, and here we actually see the consequences of this. The Season 4 arc mostly revolves around Albedo trying to become the ultimate life form. When rewatching the Alien Force and Ultimate Alien episodes, I actually really didn't like Albedo. His schemes were never really that exciting or important, and he was always defeated very easily. Even in the Alien Force finale, he was only there just to give Ben the Ultimatrix and then completely disappear from the plot after that. In Omniverse, we finally get to see Albedo's true potential as a villain when they finally give him the Ultimatrix. At first, he swapped places with Ben, that way he could steal a component and use it to create a new Ultimatrix. We later find out that he's actually in cahoots with Kyber, which is also really cool, because then it's like the Evolution guy and the Predator guy teaming up. Although Kyber do be just teaming up with people whenever. They even created an Ultimate Predator, which is pretty cool, but it was also very short-lived. At one point, Albedo uses the Ultimatrix on himself and becomes an Ultimate Galvin. He looks like friggin' Lord Omega from Sick Bricks. But apparently that's still not enough, because he kidnaps Azimuth and then tries to suck his brain out his body. And by tries, I mean very much succeeds. Goofball Azimuth accidentally bumps into the Omnitrix and then turns Ben into this like Goku Mr. Atom fusion, and then he nukes Albedo to death the end. I think this season really did justice to Albedo and the concept of Ultimate Aliens. Some great action, some okay character moments, overall pretty solid. But season 5 is when things get really interesting. No, not because the season is themed around spooky monsters. No, not because they travel to the homeworld of said spooky monsters, but because this season introduces one of the most interesting overarching mysteries in the whole series. Well, actually, not really. It was kind of badly executed, but I'll get into that later. So Ghost Freak is back, and it's revealed that his name isn't actually Ghost Freak, it's Zscare. And apparently this was always canon, especially in the classic series, they just never actually said it in the show. Also, now he can crack his head upside down for some reason, but he could have done that all along, he just never did. You'd think with a lore-heavy season like this, they would take the opportunity to better explain Ghost Freak's origin, but not really. They just kind of leave it ambiguous again. The finale focuses on Ben and a group of ragtag misfits stranded on Aner Transil, the monster planet. Sorry, but I just gotta ask, what type of backward psycho-evolution did this place have to end up with wolf people, Egyptian mummies, ghosts, and cyborg zombies? At one point, they form an unexpected alliance with Charmcaster, which is painfully ironic since she was supposed to get redeemed in Ultimate Alien, but then didn't, and became bad again in Omniverse, only for them to just team up with her again in Omniverse? Like, why then? Just be good already! So she tries to steal the Alpha Rune, but ends up losing it back to Zscare. And hold on, I thought the Alpha Rune became part of the map of Infinity. How is it back again? Also, at one point, she randomly name drops Providence, which is pretty weird because, for those who don't know, Providence is the agency from Generator Rex. So Zscare uses the Alpha Rune to resurrect this alien vampire guy called Lord Transil. Transilian is the name of the Frankenstein's monster species, Except Lord Transil isn't Transilian, he's a Vladat, which is like if an Australian guy was a Chinese prime minister named Emperor China. Vladats have the power to spit out these crystal eyeball bat thingies called corruptoras, and they latch onto people's foreheads and turn them into zombies. Ben scans the Vladat DNA and he transforms into Vampire and gains the ability to also spit corruptoras, so he takes over all of Ghost Freak's allies. Ben's Omnitrix ended up timing out, leaving him vulnerable to mind control. Apparently, Dr. Victor's species used to be enslaved by the Vladats, and being under Ben's control reminded him how awful it was, so he decides to rebel against Lord Transil. Ben turns into Atomics yet again, and then nukes everyone into oblivion yet again. So there's this guy named Chronospanner, who's like sprinkled throughout this season and later seasons, and all we really know about him is that he's from the future, and that's about it. And the buildup of this mystery I have no problem with. It's mainly just the reveal that I think was really underwhelming. Who is he? Is he good? Is he bad? What does he want? Why does he want it? It's all these questions, and most of them are kinda unanswered. I really like the Inner arc. It's always great to explore the aliens' homeworlds, and magic finally has a stake in the main story again. We even get a callback to the somewhat forgettable King Victor storyline. Even though it doesn't really add anything to the plot of the Inner story, it is always nice having continuity. The next episode is actually the 200th episode special of the entire franchise, and my god, it is a wild ride. Before I explain, let me just ask you this question. What exactly is Ben 10 about? Time and time again, we're told that Ben doesn't need the Omnitrix to be a hero, but sometimes it can be easy to forget that. But this episode is the perfect reminder of why. The episode begins with, shockingly, Ben, except we quickly find out that he actually doesn't have an Omnitrix. And from the way he reacts to the people around him, and from the way they react to him, we can actually tell that he never had an Omnitrix. We soon find out that Ben feels unfulfilled with his life. Living without an Omnitrix has made him feel unimportant, and that nothing he does will ever matter. Later, when walking down the street, he would start running into people that looked exactly like him, only instead they did have Omnitrices, and they were able to transform. The evil Bens each have their own Omnitrix, just like the main universe Ben, only they choose to use their powers for evil. They choose to be bad. Eventually, Ben meets, Ben, only this time it's the real one. Ben takes Ben to Professor Paradox, and there he explains that the entire episode we're actually following an alternate universe Ben, which, big surprise there. He also explains that all the different Bens from throughout the multiverse are being targeted. Shortly after, Eon, Vilgax, and the other evil Bens appear. Another wormhole opens up and Professor Paradox summons Ben 23, Gwen 10, and Ben 10,000. During the battle, Ben gets No-Watch Ben away from all the danger. Ben feels useless without an Omnitrix. If he can't help the other Bens fight, then, what kind of hero is he? That's whenever the main universe Ben tells him that it's just a gadget and that he makes himself a hero. Vilgax then reveals he has a device called a Chronosapien time bomb, and that apparently it's programmed to destroy every alternate Ben not from this timeline. Only that would include Eon and the Legion of Evil Bens he had been building up. The bomb goes off, and one by one, every alternate Ben is disintegrated. Eventually, the blast makes its way to Ben Prime and No-Watch Ben. Without hesitation, Ben throws himself in front of his counterpart. He yells out, "It's just a gadget. Be the hero," as the Omnitrix phases through his arm, and he disappears. Everything from the music, the visuals, the voice acting makes this scene heartbreaking. Paradox rescues Ben and he explains to him that the entire multiverse has been destroyed, and that now the only thing left to do is go back to where it all began, at the beginning. That's right, they actually travel back in time to the first episode and hide in the background and sabotage Vilgax's whole plan to steal the Omnitrix. I actually really love stuff like this, where the characters like go back to the first episode and are like hiding in plain sight, especially when there's in-universe evidence to suggest that it actually happened. After rebooting the multiverse, they collect all the good Bens, and Ben 10,000 explains to No Watch Ben what the Soto Bro effect is. With all the alternate Bens together, they go off to fight the evil Bens, except they leave No Watch Ben behind. So as it turns out, the entire team that No Watch Ben was forming is actually the exact same team that rescued him, meaning this whole thing was one giant time loop and all the alternate Bens were destined to die from the beginning anyway. But nevertheless, Ben was changed by his experiences, and now he was ready to fight Vilgax. He transforms into Clockwork and uses the Sodabro effect to revive all the destroyed Bens. Vilgax is defeated, all the alternate Bens go home, and most importantly, No Watch Ben joins the plumbers of his universe. At the very end of the episode, Paradox tells Ben so many ways to tell a story, but that's what makes them so interesting. You can never predict how they're going to turn out. But that's not where the story ends. Oh no, this is only the beginning. The story perfectly shows why watches aren't needed by choosing to follow a Ben that not only doesn't have a watch, but never had one or never will. The evil Bens all have their own watches, but they're still evil. This is meant to show that having a watch doesn't automatically make you a hero, just like how not having one doesn't automatically make you not a hero. So my thoughts on the new Ben 10,000. This version of Ben 10,000 can fuse aliens together with a device called the Biomatrix. Now that's kinda cool, but it's also kinda lame. I think this version of Ben 10,000 suffers from the same issue as the Ultimate Alien Ben 10,000, where like we never really got to see the world that he lives in. And in this series, they were able to use him more than once, meaning they had the opportunity to actually make him more developed in the original Ben 10,000, but it is kind of wasted here. Derek J. Wyatt said that he thinks classic Ben 10,000 and Omniverse Ben 10,000 are the same timeline, even though that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. The fans all believe that the new Ben 10,000 is just another, timeline split version of Ben, but I have a different theory. But I actually believe that he's the same Ben 10,000 as the one in Ultimate Alien. I mean, think about it. Whenever Ultimate Ben was introduced, it was said that he was Ben's true future self. And by the time Ben 10K rolled around, they never addressed any, alternate splitting timelines or anything like that. Ben 10K's ability to fuse aliens is an awful lot like Ultimate Ben's ability to use alien powers without transforming. What if he wasn't actually evolved, and instead he was actually just infusing little bits of alien DNA into himself? I don't know, just saying, it's a theory, might want to give it a shot. I find the inclusion of the Chronosapien time bomb kind of odd. They spent a bunch of seasons building up the Annihilarg, which is a device that can blow up entire universes, and by the time they actually need a device that can blow up universes, they just use something else. The Annihilarg is a multi-dimensional device. It's supposed to be the most powerful and destructive weapon in the whole universe, yet a Chronosapien time bomb, which is just common Chronosapien technology, can actually pick and choose what it wants to destroy. Later on, we'll find out that Vilgax actually had the Chronosapien time bomb for hundreds of years, and for some reason only waited till now to use it. Not only that, but the dude that gave it to him also for some reason never used it, even though if he did, it probably would have saved him a lot of time. No pun intended. Some people say that Atomic X being destroyed by the Chronosapien time bomb is proof that Chronosapiens are more powerful than Celestial Sapiens, but I don't think that's true for two reasons. Reason number one is that Atomic X is half Celestial Sapien, meaning he's probably not as powerful as a full Celestial Sapien, and reason number two is that I find the idea of Chronosapiens being more powerful than Celestial Sapiens really dumb because Celestial Sapiens are supposed to be like the peak of power in Ben 10. So I have to ask again, why are Chronosapiens being made the most powerful, even though they usually don't have anything to do with the stories, or even just with the series in general? Actually, speaking of Celestial Sapiens and Annihilargs and all that stuff, after the events of that whole multiverse crisis, they would actually put Ben on trial for recreating the universe after it was destroyed by the Annihilarg. Ben actually gets out of this in a very clever way. Since he technically is a bunch of different species rolled into one, he legally has like all the same species legalities as they do. So he, as a Tetraman, is allowed to declare a Tetraman trial by combat. I'm glad that they finally used the whole Annihilarg thing as an actual plot point instead of just being like, hey, remember when everyone died and then I cloned them? Boy, what a random event that only I remember. And it's confirmed that the art style changes are canon. I mean, how many times can you say that in a franchise? Like, the plot holes are canon. The inconsistencies are canon. No, no, it's not bad writing. It's just the space people. They warp things. That's totally why nothing makes sense. That's totally why all the rules are always getting broken. It's the wibbly wobbly. It's the The season 6 arc of Omniverse is really good, but I also feel like it's proof that making something dark doesn't automatically make it good. So there's this Black Ops plumber unit called the Rooters, and they basically show up and say, look, Kevin is our property, he belongs to us. Whenever Ben first got the Omnitrix, they became worried that maybe he might use it for something bad. This irresponsible 10-year-old boy gets a device that can turn him into a bunch of different superpowered aliens. That's a recipe for disaster right there. So they kidnapped Kevin and then used his osmosian absorbing abilities to create a bunch of human alien hybrid mutants. The whole purpose of the mutants was to create a hit squad that could counter Ben. Remember those plumbers kids from way back in Alien Force? Well, they were the result of those experiments. Hey, it's like I always say, no lore is complete without people getting experimented on. Well, that and ancient orders and giant demons from another dimension that bring about the end of the world, which are also in Ben 10, actually. Kevin's father was a plumber. He would never approve of something like this happening. Well, he can't really approve of anything at all because he doesn't actually exist. And I don't mean that in like a he died kind of way. I mean he literally is a fake person created by the Rooters to fool everyone into thinking something. And Osmosian isn't even a real species either. There is no planet called Osmos 5. Osmosian is just a subspecies of human, except each Osmosian has a different power and only Kevin can absorb. Excuse me, but what? The plumber's kids being mutants instead of hybrids, I think, is a pretty okay retcon, since we've always been told that they're the kids of plumbers, but we've never actually met their parents or seen their lives prior to their introduction. So this completely makes sense. But you cannot spend an entire season fighting an Osmosian with absorbing abilities and then just stop and go, you know what? All that never happened. I don't even get what they're trying to imply with a reveal like this. They say that, like, oh,
Every Osmosian has a different ability when the only Osmosians we've seen have been able to absorb. It's not like there is some big mystery of like, oh, who are all these guys and why can they do all these very different things? I know they're Osmosians. Some people have theorized that Cervantes just lied and that maybe Osmosians and Kevin's dad are real. Other people say that maybe this all just happened because of the celestial sapiens warping reality. Some people just refuse it to be canon altogether. And hey, some people are actually fine with this reveal. Some people think that it actually improves the continuity. And there actually is a canon in universe reason for Agrigor. Apparently, he's actually a genetic copy of Kevin. And as for Ragnarok, the guy who killed Kevin's dad, he's actually a Reuters operative that was meant to just pretend he had killed Kevin's dad. Now, yes, both of those things are canon, except, they're not actually shown or mentioned in the show itself. These are things that were like tweeted out by the writers of the show after these episodes came out. So, in the show itself, these things are still left ambiguous. And I also find it pretty irritating how the rooters just kind of show up and then start revealing all this information. Like, we've never heard of them before, we've never seen them before, but they're still, like, this important to the universe. I feel like they should have been included in previous episodes, maybe as, like, side characters that help them, but still, like, at very shady. That way, it feels more like they actually exist, and not like they just came into existence out of nowhere. Also, Phil is a member of the Rooters, which I think is pretty cool, and I like how Phil is back and all. But at the same time, I mean, I don't really know how the dude was able to get a job, since he at any moment could transform into a murderous, bloodthirsty spider Sasquatch. How I would fix the Rooters arc is first of all, make it like just a little bit longer. It does the most with the 3 episodes, and I guess 4 if you want to count Universe versus Tennyson, that's given, but I still feel like with this many changes and with this much of this stuff going on, it should have had a bit more build up. First of all, Devin Levin was real and he actually died. Devin found out what was going on, and when he tried to stop them, he was killed by Cervantes' right-hand man, Ragnarok. Then the Rooters created a genetically engineered Osmosian with Kevin and or Devin's DNA, and they would give him the memory of killing Devin, and then send him out into the world telling everyone that he's the one who did it, all as a big cover-up for their hidden Rooters operation. Then everything would just play out pretty much exactly how it really did. You can still introduce Ragnarok during Alien Force Season 3. You can maybe hint at him having a greater connection to the plumbers. Just don't reveal the rooters and don't reveal he killed Devin, and especially don't kill him off. Then you introduce Agrigor, an ultimate alien, and this time say that he has killed Kevin's father. This could create like extra tension between the two of them, but he's still defeated the same way. Kevin still mutates. Everything still, for the most part, stays the same. Then Omniverse rolls around, we can still have big reveals, big plot twists. The retcon will still feel like a retcon, just not one that completely breaks all the logic we've spent years building. Kevin and the other plumber's kids go bad and start attacking Ben and his team. During the battle, Ben hits Kevin on the face, creating this red X scar under his chin, which might seem like a pretty random detail, but when I realized what it was, I was terrified. Well, you might remember how way back in the original Ben 10,000 episode, Kevin in that future is still evil, and he also has a scar on his chin, and he's even wearing a uniform that looks suspiciously like a Reuters uniform. And as you know, Derek J. White keeps trying to convince us that the Omniverse future is the classic series future. That right there is basically one giant implication that Kevin has gone bad for good. Then it was revealed that Kevin was actually only pretending to be bad and he was never even bad at all in the first place. This could have been the best Ben 10 story, period. But honestly, even with the plot holes, even with the leaps in logic, it is still one of the greatest storylines Omniverse has ever created. The final arc of Omniverse, much like the first arc, spans 2 seasons instead of 1. The final season is about Ben and Ben 10,000 being stuck in a time war against a chronosapien named Mal Truant. But it's less of a time war and more of a time feud. It is just the good guys and bad guys randomly bumping into each other in either the past or future. Maltruant was actually mentioned way back in like season 1. Apparently there is an entire off-screen time war that we never got to see. And honestly, the off-screen one sounds cooler than the one that we actually got. So there's these 2 bad guys from the future, and they keep going around stealing these different artifacts because they're trying to rebuild their old master, Maltruant. The way everything plays out makes you feel like Maltruant was like shown before this, even though he actually wasn't, and it makes everything just a little bit more, I guess, frustrating because we don't know who Maltruant is. I guess technically Ben does, but all that was off screen. We don't really know how he was split up into all these tiny little pieces, and we don't really know what he was doing before that. At one point, Malware banishes Ben and Ben 23 to Mad Ben's world, which really makes me wish we actually got to see some of the other Evil Ben worlds. I think the final season does a good job wrapping up every plotline and concluding every loose end. But that's why it's really weird how the final season introduces someone like Skurd. Skurd is this like really rare species called a slimebiot that can absorb and mutate DNA or whatever. So one day Kyber just randomly finds Skurd, this like extinct species, just in a hole somewhere, and then he fuses with him and now he's allowed to use the Nemetrix on himself. Then Skurd decided, you know what, screw it, the Omnitrix has more DNA anyway, and he unmerged with Kyber and then fused with Ben. Then the Nemetrix melted Kyber's mind and he went insane and then died. Now I think it's perfectly fine that Kyber's stomach is brutally torn open and ripped to shreds by the Nemetrix, since after all he was perfectly fine using it on other people, especially, Phil. But Skurd himself is a pretty controversial subject. Some people thought his snarky attitude was really funny and that his shape-shifting powers were cool. Others just thought he was annoying. I don't know how accurate this is, but I heard somewhere that the whole reason they made Skurd was to boost toy sales, which is really weird when you consider the fact that they never actually made any merch based on him, so he never got to serve the whole purpose they created him for. I find it incredibly odd that they chose to introduce a character like this in the final season of the show. I feel like he should have just stayed like a one-off character. His powers are cool at first, but then they just start to feel kind of unnecessary and like they make Ben way too overpowered. Skurd is like that classic episode where Ben unlocked fusions, only if he actually kept the ability to do that and he just kept using it over and over again every episode. I don't really find him annoying, but I don't really find him funny either. He just kind of talks to fill air. In the episode Malgax Attacks, Vilgax, Albedo, and Malware all team up to go fight Ben. Albedo teams up with Vilgax again, even though he's already betrayed him like twice before, and also they have this really neat callback to the Destroy All Aliens movie with the Mechamorph armor. Now, the reason why I bring this episode up is because in it, Ben decides he's tired of sharing the bathroom with this gooey green thing, and so he gets Skurd removed. But after getting hit by Vilgax like once, he decides that he's completely powerless and that he needs Skurd. Are you freaking kidding me? He needs Skurd? Even after all this, we're still hung up on the needs powers thing? So that Spanner dude who's been interfering with time, surprise, surprise, he's involved with a time war. In the final episode, it's revealed that Spanner is actually Ken Tennyson, Ben's son. Remember him from the classic series? It's also officially confirmed that he's the son of Kai Green. Remember her also from the classic series? The whole Spanner thing doesn't actually have anything to do with the Time War. It's not like he goes back in time with the intention of stopping it and then accidentally makes it worse. It's not like he went back in time with some other intention and then accidentally caused the Time War. No, it just kind of happens. He even back to the futures himself at one point. He goes back and tells Ben and Kai that they're destined to be married in the future, and this has zero repercussions. I also don't like how they reveal this twist at like the tail end of the series, so they don't really have a chance to explore how this affects him or his parents. While we're on the topic of Ken's parents, a lot of the fans really hate Kai Green, and it's actually for a pretty simple, understandable reason. Ben and Kai don't like each other. Now, I think if they started out as rivals and then grew to like each other, if they had an arc, that would have been perfectly fine. In fact, I think that would have benefited. But there is no arc. They do the accidental Naruto kiss and then smash cut to the future. They're married with children. But hey, what about Esther? What about Esther? Well, there actually is an explanation. And oh boy, if you thought Julie's unintroduction was bad, get ready. Esther leaves Ben for Antonio. Freaking Antonio? Is there character development? Yes. Yes, there is. It's just character development that took place off screen. 'Cause like the old saying goes, tell don't show. In the finale, Maltruant travels to the future where he steals a dwarf star and reprograms the Annihilarg. Maltruant escapes, so Ben and Rook follow them with their time machines. While in the time vortex, all three of them crash land in the 1700s where they encounter the first human plumber, George Washington. Since this took place in the past, it was originally going to include one of Zack Saturday's ancestors, which would have been like the greatest thing ever. This also would have implied that the plumbers and secret scientists actually stemmed from the same organization, which has huge lore implications. While in the past they would also encounter a young Vilgax, which implies that his whole obsession with the Omnitrix actually started because Ben went back in time and fought him here. So they follow Maltruant even further back in time and end up at the dawn of existence, the Big Bang. There they meet the most powerful beings in the universe, maybe, actually, I don't really know. The Contumalia. And whenever Ben looks at them, they take the form of the Mr. Smoothie mascot. Now, I get, like, the joke, I get what they're going for here, but, like, imagine showing this to, like, someone who hasn't seen Ben 10, and then telling them, oh yeah, this is, like, the most powerful alien that, like, was introduced in the series finale. Like, it's kind of disappointing whenever you look at it like that. Also, the Contumalia are God. Like, they invented the Big Bang. They created the concept of sentient life. They are walking proof that, like, every religion has now been debunked. And Ben just does not bat an eye at any of this. He shrugs it off. He's completely fine with this. It reminds me of how in Justice League Unlimited they gloss over the fact that Brainiac literally invented a cure for cancer. Ben and Rook very quickly come to the conclusion that Annihilargs not only destroy entire universes, but they can also create entire universes, so Maltruant swaps the real Annihilarg out with his Annihilarg.
Ben fails to stop the deploying of the new Anilarg, and with no option left, he jumps in after it. The Anilarg goes off and Ben seemingly dies. Then it is revealed that he had actually, at the last second, transformed into feedback and caught the entire Big Bang. Ben cycles through every one of his transformations before firing the Big Bang back at Maltruant and destroying him. Since Ben and Rook saved the universe, the Contumalia let them stay behind so they can watch the creation of everything. Skurrid leaves Ben and Rook to go hang out with the rest of his people, which, I don't really care. Didn't really like you anyway. He says, oh, we had a good run. I personally feel like you just didn't really have a run, at all, because you were barely in the show, man. Then Paradox shows up and he explains that now they gotta hide all of Maltruant's remains all over the universe, that way he can eventually be found and put back together again, only for him to explode and get separated again, and then be found and put together again, and then explode and get separated again, and be put back together and then be separated again. This doesn't make any sense at all. If this is how the time loop works, then where did the time loop start, and also why is Maltruant evil? If Maltruant's whole life is one long time loop, then when did he recruit Subdora and Exoskull? They seem to already know who he was before putting him back together. And what about the original Time War? How is he even able to participate in that if his whole existence is just stuck here? After returning to Earth, Ben decides, you know what, the universe is a big place. Why waste time sitting here and we can go out and see it? So he plans this huge, big family getaway road trip in outer space. If that isn't the most circular, full circle you've ever circled, then I don't know what is. Originally, the whole road trip thing was actually going to be a ninth season of Omniverse, but I'm kind of glad it never happened because I feel like you really cannot top that finale. If they really wanted to continue it, then I think they should have made a different show entirely instead of just continuing Omniverse. Now, the last arc of Omniverse is rocky at best, but they really, really stuck the landing with that ending. Like I said before, feedback is Ben's childlike wonder, and if he hadn't gotten him back, then he wouldn't have even been able to save the universe. Ben 10 Omniverse might be my favorite iteration of Ben 10. So many years, so many stories, so many adaptations, it feels like we've only just scratched the surface of this universe's potential. I think there should be a new Ben 10. It could be a live-action TV show, or a movie trilogy, or a comic series, or a cartoon. I don't really care what it is, but I think there should be, at the very least, one new Ben 10. And I wanted to draw from everything: classic, Alien Force, Ultimate Alien, Omniverse, the reboot, Rex, Saturdays, everything. I want this new version to dive deep into all the lore of everything, show how everything connects, show the inner workings of everything. There is a lot of lore in Ben 10 that you only really know if you're in the loop with the fans or the creators. I want no more of that. I want everything here in this version. And hey, maybe we can make it even a bit more mature as well. Maybe we can start having blood and killing off characters more, but don't make it too edgy. We don't want to get, consumed by all that. I feel like that'll ruin it if it's too edgy. But, you get what I'm trying to say, right? But hey, it's just a thought. I had a real blast rewatching all these childhood shows, and making these videos was kind of a pain, especially this one. I hope I don't have to make another hour-long video again. I started this back in October, I think, actually, and it's coming out now, which is probably January by now. It's probably next year by now. Hello, future people of the future. Hi. But anyways, even though I spoiled the absolute heck out of all these shows, I seriously recommend you go check them out for yourselves. They're really good, and they still hold up. But anyways, until then, this has been Bradworst, signing
3 months. Is that really all it takes to forget about your old pal, Lenny? I'm hurt. Honestly, I'm hurt. Well, fine then. I guess I'll just have to give you a year you won't forget. Oh, and this time, Bradwurst, I'm not alone. Hey, he's a reference to the incredible Mr. Limpet. Get it, everyone? You, you know the classic Don Knotts movie where he turns into a fish, and when he's human, he's live action, but when he's a fish, he's a cartoon. He's like a fish with glasses. Or anybody? Hello?